I slept with another woman while me and my wife were separated. I 48 male have been married to my wife 41 female, Sophie, for almost 20 years and we have 6 children together. We have lived in Palestine throughout our marriage as me and wife are both Palestinian, although I spent some of my childhood in America and lived there for 10 years before we were married, and I am an American national as well as being Palestinian. My wife and I are distantly related, and I have known her since she was born as we spent our childhood summers together. But before you think anything weird, as I am 7 years older than her, you should know I didn't really pay any attention to her before she was a fully grown woman. We got married when she was 21. In the years before we married, I lived in New York, very focused on my career, and had no plans whatsoever to live in Palestine at any point in my life, as I saw my career as the most important thing and New York was the place to pursue those goals. I never had much emphasis on getting married, and I don't think I even was dead set on being a father. I had a really messed up childhood, and his wife physically and emotionally taxed me throughout my entire childhood, telling me I was worthless and a mistake and that I would never amount to anything. I think that's why I was so obsessed with my career. I felt that that was the way to prove myself and show my father how successful I was. I don't speak to either of my parents. As a result of my childhood, I am a very unemotional and practical person. I am also confident in my abilities and my intelligence, and I prefer to keep to myself. I also was a big believer in putting myself first, satisfying myself before anybody else and then thinking about other people. Not necessarily selfish, however. That's why I couldn't really see myself as a husband or a father. My wife is the opposite of me. She lives to help people and is literally the most generous, kindest, selfless, and sweetest person I have ever met in my entire life, and she always has been. I remember this from when we were kids. My aunt has Down syndrome, and when my wife was young, she used to spend so much time with her and talk to her and literally be the only person in our family to treat her like a human being. She would sit with her for hours, do activities like bake with her and make jewelry with her. If the other girls in the family would go out and Safa wouldn't be allowed to go, keep in mind that she is mentally the age of those girls. Although she was 40, my wife would stay home with her and miss out so that Safa wouldn't feel left out. I have a million more stories like that. Anyways, I came to Palestine to visit at some point, and I saw her at her grandparents' house when she was 20, and I realized that she is still beautiful on the inside, but now she was also incredibly beautiful on the outside. We spoke for a long time, and she kept asking me questions about my life and my job, and the way she was asking was so strange to me. She was so genuinely interested about my life. I mean, everybody in the Middle East is naturally more caring towards other people as it is not an individualistic society, but Sophie was something else. Follow-up questions to every question, like she was really listening. I don't know why, but that was so special and endearing to me. I saw her many more times during the holiday, and after a while I was actively seeking her company. I went back to New York besotted with her. Day and night she was on my mind. To be honest, I was not particularly happy about it. Without asking Sophie, I knew she would never want to have any kind of relationship before marriage, never want to move to New York, and want to be a mother more than anything. I tried to forget her, and I couldn't. I decided to ask my employers if I could work from Jerusalem. If they said yes, then I would go and ask for her hand, and if no, then I would do my best to move on. They said yes. And within 2 months I was living in Palestine. I asked Sophie's father for her hand, and after a 3-month intensive interrogation process he said I could only marry his daughter if I stopped drinking alcohol, and of course I did. I was so nervous to ask Sophie, so I asked her dad to prep her first and tell her that I wanted to marry her. She said yes, and later revealed to me that she had been thinking about me a lot since my visit and had felt inexplicably sad when I left, to the point of tears a few times. We were engaged for a year, in which she and I fell deeply in love. We've been married for 20 years, and 6 kids, and save for the last 2 which have been confusing, aggravating, saddening and a whirlwind, we have been very happy together. I can honestly tell you I loved my wife more and more every day, and she was worth everything I gave up and more. However, 3 years ago I was offered a job in New York. It was amazing in every way. So good for my career and could bring me everything I ever wanted. I convinced Sophie that it was a good idea by telling her it would be a trial basis, and if after a year either of us were unhappy we would return to Palestine. Let me fast forward through the part where my marriage collapses because my wife was very unhappy and I was away for work a lot and prioritized my work over her. I was gone for weeks at a time, for 2 years, all the fights, the awful things I said to her, and the monster of a husband I became. She left me and went back to Palestine, and she took the kids with her. It took me 5 months to realize how badly I had messed up and how much I missed her and my kids every day. I went home, and of course I didn't expect Sophie to want anything to do with me, so I tried to just stick to being her co-parent and for her to realize the monster that I had become in America was gone forever. She took me back after 6 months of me being home. She had told me that after I had ultimately chosen my work over her, she didn't really know how to cope. She said that getting married so young meant she tied her happiness to me in an unhealthy way, and she said that for the most part of our marriage that hadn't been a noticeable issue for her because I always treated her with love and took care of her, but when I stopped doing that and our marriage fell apart, she had an identity crisis and didn't even know who she if she wasn't my wife. That's why she put reconciliation on hold for so long, because she wanted to know herself properly. She told me that what pushed her to realize that she still wanted to be my wife again was the fact that I told her I was in complete support of her doing whatever she felt was necessary for her growth and well-being, and that if at the end of that journey she decided she didn't want to get back together, I would be okay with that as long as she was happy, although it would crush me. I reaffirmed my lifelong love for her and my regret for my actions, and I think that conversation was the third time I've ever cried in front of her. To be honest, I died a little inside when she told me how much she felt she had suffered because of getting married so young. I've always wanted her to be less reliant on me, less insecure and more confident in herself. Now that we are back together, I can honestly see such a difference in her. I told her she looked beautiful the other day, and for the first time in 20 years of marriage she didn't roll her eyes. She said, "Thank you." She told me the other day that she was thinking of going back to college to get a teaching qualification, and I support her 100%. Okay, now on to the problem. I'm so sorry for that long backstory. After my wife left, during that 5-month period, I bumped into my first ever girlfriend in New York. She was unmarried and working in New York. Considering the insane coincidence as she also was born and raised in Palestine, I convinced myself that getting into a relationship with this woman was some kind of fate. Our initial relationship had ended because of family drama, as she is not Palestinian and both our families went nuts when they found out. We were forced apart and I honestly loved her. You know what they say, you never forget your first love. Anyway, I went on 3 dates with her and then we slept together. To be honest, this was the thing that caused me to pack up and leave New York for good. During this period, I had warped my mind into thinking my wife was the bad person in all of this for not supporting my career and taking my kids away. I genuinely convinced myself she was evil. It terrifies me that I was capable of doing, saying, and thinking the things I did during this period of time. If somebody said some of the thing I though about Sophie in front of me, I would beat the crap out of them. It makes me want to cry thinking about it. I remember lying next to the woman after doing the dirty and her falling asleep. Sophie called me crying to tell me that there was a leak in the bathroom and that it had flooded, and she didn't know what to do and she was so overwhelmed with everything. It was like in that moment I came back to myself after so long. I told her what to do, and then when it stopped, she started laughing because she had overreacted, and I wasn't laughing at all. I broke down crying and started telling her I was sorry, and I loved her, and she told me to come home then. I said okay. After I put the phone down, I decided to pretend that I had to go into work because I couldn't keep laying next to a woman that wasn't my wife. I later told the woman that I was moving back to Palestine to be closer to my kids. She understood, although she was disappointed. Cut to 1 year later, she just contacted me and told me that she has moved back to Palestine, and she wants to get back together. I told I can't because I am back with my wife. She assumed that I didn't really love my wife and that I was just back with her for convenience, and then started reciting back the stuff I told her about Sophie. She said that she was my true love, and we were fated to be together, and I explained the situation to her, my marriage, why it had ended, and that I did indeed love my wife. From then on, the messages got more aggressive, saying that I had used her. Maybe I did, and I apologized for it right then and there. In the end I blocked her, but the truth is I'm terrified Sophie will find out what happened, because I know it will break her heart to find out I slept with another woman, even if technically it wasn't wrong. Me and her were separated. It's more than that. I know my wife. She will understand the fact that I didn't cheat on her on a basic level but not on an emotional one. This will break her heart. Doing the dirty is such a sacred thing for her, and she has convinced me of its specialness during our 20-year marriage. The fact that I partook in the act through which me and Sophie have expressed our love for 20 years with another woman, the act that created our children, is not a small thing. I have hurt her so much over the last few years, and I don't want to hurt her again by making her aware of the lengths of my disregard of our marriage during our separation. I need advice. I'm scared my ex will find Sophie and tell her, as I already know she can locate Sophie on social media. During our 3-date relationship she told me she had found my Facebook in our years apart, and then proceeded to tell me she was surprised my wife was so much older looking than me. Bullcrap. All it takes is a simple message. It would be catastrophic if Sophie found out like that, but I don't think me telling her would make much difference. What should I do? I love my wife.